It's disappointing. Okay, let's keep reading. SIGINT proved vital in the US negotiations that resulted in 2 key and unanimously approved Security Council resolutions on Iraq. SIGINT, those Security Council resolutions are significantly after Afghanistan, but Afghanistan isn't mentioned until much later in that paragraph.
Yeah.
SIGINT also contributed to the composition of the US President's speech at the UN General Assembly in September of 2002. Was that the WMDs? Was that Bush's WMDs? Let's have a look and see what we can find about Bush's. Actually, we might be able to find it on YouTube. It's probably the place to go. I'm in the wrong browser. 12th of September, that'll be it, the September 2002. What's about it?
Mr. Secretary General.
The President spoke. Oh, okay, but it doesn't actually tell you what.
Distinguished delegates and ladies and gentlemen, we meet 1 year and 1 day after a terrorist attack.
This must have been the case for war in Iraq.
To my country.
Yeah.
And brought grief by the will and wickedness of any man. And to bring medical care where it is desperately needed. It's a symbol of our commitment to human dignity.
We're going to bring medical care. I'm sorry, all I can do is laugh at this.
By side.
We're going to bring medical care to Iraq by destroying it.
Like all other
people. No, the double speak is complete here.
That serves their interests.
And peace in Palestine, he just said.
Within many nations, including my own. And the regime's forces were poised to continue their march to seize other countries and their resources.
Now he's saying Iraq is a threat to the region.
Had Saddam Hussein been appeased instead of stopped, he would have endangered the peace and stability of the world.
No, it's talking about
this aggression was stopped by the might of coalition forces and the will of the United Nations.
See how he ties them together?
Yeah.
The might of the coalition forces and the will of the coalition forces. No, might of the coalition forces and the will of the United Nations. So yeah, this is where he's roping them together. Mm-hmm. This is where he is tying them together. And then if we go back to the document where they are specifically talking about his speech, US President's speech at the UN, SIGINT also contributed to the composition of Bush's speech in September 2002. And to Secretary Powell's presentation to the Security Council on the case against the Iraq dictator, among other events. So that is the NSA directly saying that they are responsible for WMDs.
Mm-hmm. Well, for the narrative, for that line of argument for the war, which I had thought at the time.
They're calling that historic. They're saying it's historic. Well, it was fucking historic. It was a historic clusterfuck mess up.
Yeah, and in the wake of that, after everyone had realized, in the public, it's kind of sort of, after it started to be admitted as a massive mistake, and that the media had been complicit in spreading this narrative, I had heard more about the CIA kind of groupthink being what instigated this argument. So it's surprising to me to see the NSA also being behind it. I mean, it's not hugely surprising, but it's not something I had heard before. So, I mean, Susie, is it that way for you? Had you heard more about the CIA's involvement in this, or?
I'm going to finish the document and then I want to have a quick look through and see if there's anything else that Bush said in that video.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't want to make judgment calls and on questions like that until like I've read through everything that there is, and I'm very interested to see what other documents there are relating to the UN. I think this topic is actually one of the most significant topics in the Snowden files.
I agree.
It's something that we don't hear very much about. I mean, there's been like passing mentions of like NSA and UN, but the focus has been on NSA, where for me, the focus here is not on NSA, the focus is on the UN.
Yeah.
What is the UN doing? What is the involvement of the UN? Because we're always told like the UN is crippled by the big powers having veto ability at the Security Council. Like the UN is the victim. Like the UN, it would be really great if only blah, 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 blah.
Basically, if only they had more authority and power.
Exactly. But what this is showing is that the authority and power that it already has is being used to support war rather than to avoid it, as far as I can tell. I mean, this is my read of now multiple documents suggesting exactly that. It seems like these guys are in cahoots. Are they in cahoots because the US has, or I mean, you just asked about role of CIA. I would imagine one of the roles of CIA would be compromising the integrity of the UN, getting agents into positions of power at the UN, specifically so that they could work together. And then your next question would be the revelations about Hillary Clinton ordering biometric data collection on wasn't it Kofi Annan?
I think so. I'm not on.
I think it was during Kofi Annan's
right.
reign at the UN as Inspector General. Perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps it was Ban Ki-moon, but I'm pretty sure it was Kofi Annan. She ordered like all of the senior staff at UN, of which ex-Prime Minister of New Zealand Helen Clark is head of UNDP, Development Program at the UN. Just like number 3 at the UN or something. She would have been one of them. They were targeted for biometric collection by the United States, and that was signed off on by Hillary Clinton. So when you talk about CIA in the UN context, I would think that subverting, infiltrating, maybe sabotaging, and misappropriating funds and resources of the UN, that's basically what it was. When we read in the last document about how Colin Powell had taken the NSA spying intelligence products, and walked in there and convinced the UN, knowing that he would have the votes from the key players, convinced the UN to take on the Iraq debacle, the post-war cleanup, so to speak, and the transition to the new government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What he was doing is getting the United Nations, getting the entire planet to foot the bill for the US's invasion. So he was like palming the financial responsibility, but also the blood and treasure, as they say, like UN peacekeeping forces, like men, bodies on the ground going in, and UN having to provide. I mean, we just sat here and listened to George Bush. Actually, I'm just going to take this off so I can finish my little rant. We just sat there and listened to George Bush saying, we're going to bring medical support and humanitarian aid and blah, blah, blah to Iraq, like to justify invading Iraq. But they didn't. It was the UN. They went to the UN and they sold it to the UN that the UN needed to come in and take responsibility for the transitional government and for, all the programs and everything. And this is where like the World Food Program and all these other UN programs that we see being rolled, through into Syria and everywhere else. And they are compromised by the CIA. We know they are. We know that like Serena Shim revealed that they were, chucking weapons and troops into Syria and whatnot in those. So these things are definitely interrelated. And you wonder, like, if we know that that's what they're doing with UN resources, that can be yet another reason why they want a UN presence.
Yeah.
The US wants a UN presence. We have to look at why do they want that?
Because they know that they can co-opt it, is what it looks like. And they already have. I mean,
I think they'd like to usurp all of the resources that they can and turn them to their own ends. The same as we saw with the Global Network Forum.
Definitely.
They said, we have to utilize all of the resources of all the world's intelligence agencies to do what we want to do.
Yeah.
And
that was a one-way street. in a lot of
This
ways.
is the
Yeah.
war version of that. This is the, on the ground version of that, rather than signals intelligence or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy to illustrate that.
This is them wanting to utilize the UN's money, the UN's troops, the UN's infrastructure for the US agenda.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
And as you said earlier, it's for an agenda that's against their charter. So it definitely raises questions about giving the UN any more power if it's just going to be co-opted by the US and by an agenda that's against their charter.
Does Susie and Elizabeth have any keywords worth searching all the docs for? Eben Kim, UN would be a really great one. $36 and good clip there. Oh, someone's planning our next mini clip. Awesome. Go for it, someone. If you think there's a good clip there, go for it. Protect What's True says they probably have something on everyone in the UN and push this agenda. Yeah, or they have someone in everywhere in the UN.
Yeah, and as we've looked at before, drawing the line sometimes between all of these groups is really difficult. They just become so intermeshed that it's not the defined, clear dividing lines that you would maybe think that there are.
Cockatoo says they collected biometrics widely at the UN, not just Kofi. And how, it's interesting. It would be interesting to go back and look at when that order from Clinton was to collect all the biometric data on the UN employees, and then look at the date of the implementation of Aadhaar database in India, where they are collecting the biometric information of an entire population, and to look at what is the turnaround? What is the turnaround time between them implementing covert biometric collection against diplomats and them employing public, regulated, not regulated in terms of restricted, regulated as in terms of enforced, mandatory biometric collection of the public.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to look that up, I would really like to know how many years difference between Clinton covertly ordering biometric collection on diplomats and Aadhaar, the Indian government, with the help of CIA contractors, forcefully implementing biometric collection in India. Huge. Huge, huge, huge. Okay, I want to check out the rest of that document and see if there is anything else there.
Yeah, no, this is one I definitely want to spend some time on for sure.
SIGINT also helped US, UN, and state officials in their decisions regarding Afghanistan countless peacekeeping operations. Peacekeeping operations are UN operations. But they're saying SIGINT helped the US in their decision-making for peacekeeping operations around the world. That reads to me like a tacit admission that they control the UN.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me too.
I mean, like, I'm honestly not meaning to exaggerate this at all, but that basically, it says right there, SIGINT also helped US and UN state officials in their decisions regarding peacekeeping operations around the world, Africa, Sudan, and so many other situations.
Yeah.
So basically everything the US has ever done or said at the UN has been based on signals intelligence, sometimes true, sometimes faulty. For example, WMDs, etc. Perhaps sometimes manufactured to be faulty. But now looking to the future, the ambassador recently set clear goals for the next number of months. His deputy is in place and is an experienced user, so she's a customer of the SIGINT. A new Director of Central Intelligence representative is in place. A former presidential daily briefer, and such successor as the NSA representative, such and such is also in place. Fortunately for the US UN, the array of technicians, collectors, analysts, managers, and support personnel. Look, this the fact they even call it US UN is making me feel like this is what they can. This is how they think of the UN.
Yeah, and when they say "quote unquote" helping, I mean, I take it as a lot stronger of a word than, I mean, because whatever they're saying, I always interpret as kind of
an understatement.
Yeah, exactly, an understatement of the reality. So if you take them at their word, maybe it's concerning. But if you assume that the reality is a little bit stronger than that, then I think it's extremely concerning.
Okay, I'm just going to go back to that George Bush video and just remind us of what else is in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, someone. This research really does validate a lot, a huge amount. I've learned more about the UN from studying these documents than I've ever learned about the UN from reading God knows how many articles about it.
Yeah.
Evan Kim says UN has 4 documents with 6 instances. Eben, what you want to do is look at what batch release, what document release it's from. So right now we're on batch 4. So any documents that are in 1, 2, or 3, we have already seen. So particularly any documents from the UN that are in release 5 or 6 would be the ones that we have not yet studied. You guys want to tweet out some of like what we're discussing and discovering would be really cool, because as you can see, Elizabeth and I get so caught up in the research we totally like forget to tweet. But we will retweet you if you tweet about the discoveries and the discussion. Okay, let's have a quick look at what George Bush has to say.
Yeah, especially if you tag us, then we'll be able to see your tweets really easily.
To suspend hostilities, to spare himself, Iraq's dictator accepted a series of commitments. Security Council Resolution 688 demanded that the Iraqi regime cease at once the repression of its own people.
So there we go. So they have a long history of passing these resolutions through the UN as pretext.
Including the systematic repression of minorities, which the Council said threatened international peace and security.
I believe he's referring to the chemical attacks against the Kurd. The chemicals came from the United States.
In the region. This 87 demanded that Iraq return.
Okay, so he's going through a chronological order of the past UN resolutions relating to Iraq. So this is him building the case.
All prisoners from Kuwait against Iran, Israel, and Western governments.
Interesting that they're using aggression against Iran as a factor in why they need to invade Iraq.
Yeah.
When they knew full well 2 things. First of all, that they armed Iraq in the war against Iran. The US was fully complicit in dragging that war out for as long as possible. And also that their strategic planning, their own war planning documents included to invade Iran. They absolutely anticipated that after Iraq fell, that Iran would be next on. But here they are going, Iraq's aggression against Iran is a reason, yet another reason that we should invade Iraq.
Yeah.
It's just really duplicitous.
Yeah, I think most people are going to be aware of our current kind of antagonism toward Iran. So it's completely hypocritical on so many different levels hearing this.
When we hear, look at what he's just said, like, oh God, it would be actually quite an interesting exercise to go back and dismantle the speech retrospectively would be quite an interesting exercise. He's just said, Iraqi dissidents abroad are targeted for murder. Well, what did we see post Snowden's disclosures? We have had how many people from the administration, from the Bush administration, from Obama administration, on television making threats of murder. We've got Hillary Clinton saying Julian Assange should be droned to death. We've got
we've still got the same thing going on now.
That they're making against Iraq, they are equally guilty of themselves.
Yeah, if not worse, for sure.
In 1993, Iraq attempted to assassinate the Emir of Kuwait.
And how many times did the US attempt to assassinate Fidel Castro?
Yeah.
How many times? But Iraq attempted to assassinate. This is what I mean. The hypocrisy is like next level.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's difficult to even begin.
Former American president. Iraq's government openly praised the attacks of September the 11th. And al-Qaeda terrorists escaped from Afghanistan and are known to be in.
See, I don't remember Iraq's government ever openly praising the attacks of September 11th.
Yeah, I don't either, but I was probably not as politically aware at the time, so.
I think they had that like psyop of people like down with America, like in the streets or whatever. I don't believe that the Iraqi government put out an official diplomatic statement saying, yeah, it's fantastic that America had like lost the World Trade Center. I'm pretty sure that never happened.
It would have been pretty unwise if they did.
In Iraq. In 1991, the Iraqi regime agreed in Afghanistan and aircraft spray tank.
I don't know if you guys can hear it in the video, but there's like this increasing like level of murmuring in the background.
Interesting. No, I didn't pick that up.
In the room. It's like, yeah, the room is starting to hum.
Interesting. So they're trying to, maybe they're discussing what we just did, which is that, did Iraq actually do that? Or, I don't know.
I'm reading it as like the increased activity is like, they can feel that this is building up to something, right? Yeah. Like this is his big, he's just sat there and so far he's spent 11 minutes prattling on about how Iraq is the most evil country in the world. And I think everyone in the room understands that this is going somewhere and they are communicating that back to their home countries.
Yeah.
Thanks. UN inspectors believe Iraq has produced 2 to 4 times the amount of biological agents it declared. And has.
Well, funny you should mention that as well. Look at all of this is shit. Sorry, but look what happened with David Kelly, Iraq nuclear weapons inspector. I mean, look at what happened. He said they didn't have anything and he ended up dead.
Yeah.
So when he's just made that claim, he's just said that they have 2 to 4 times the amount of biological precursors that they've said that they have. We now go back to the NSA document and we see them openly stating that that intelligence came from, lo and behold, the NSA.
Yeah, from SIGINT. Yeah, see, I was under the impression it had come more from the CIA, but this is interesting to learn that.
As the US mounted a strategic blah, 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 worked with the UN to garner world support for global war on terrorism, SIGINT proved vital in the US negotiations that resulted in 2 key unanimously approved Security Council resolutions on Iraq.
So they're basically taking direct responsibility here.
SIGINT proved vital. SIGINT also contributed to the composition of the speech that we're listening to right now on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, that is very, very, very direct involvement in this issue that I was unaware of. So I'm sure there are some others that were also unaware that the NSA was this directly involved in the narrative that led up to the war in Iraq, second one.
Wow, that's just unbelievable.
Yeah, that's definitely something to write about for sure.
Yeah, please. I mean, this document's massive. Okay, let's keep going here.
Has failed to account for more than 3 metric tons of material that could be used to produce biological weapons.
So here's what I see. I see that he's gone through the chronological order of past resolutions in Iraq.
Yeah.
Which this NSA document has just told us that the NSA has been responsible for going back through UN peacekeeping missions across decades, been responsible for helping to secure these resolutions. So George Bush is sitting here and going, well, we've already got this resolution, that resolution, the other resolution, which were based off NSA reporting. And now we know from this document that this very speech is based off NSA reporting. Now he's in the middle of the speech and it's the meat in the sandwich. And the meat in the sandwich is given the historical context, the manufactured historical context. Now he's giving the meat in the sandwich, which is the biological weapons, the weapons of mass destruction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Iraq is an imminent threat. So Iraq has been a historical threat. Now Iraq is an imminent threat. And the NSA in these documents that Snowden has provided the world with, the true history, is directly taking responsibility for having provided that intelligence, which we know in retrospect was bullshit.
And not only providing the intelligence, but participating in their speech writing. That's so, I mean, that's drastic.
Well, technically not the writing, but they've provided the content. And they're proud of it. And not only are they proud of it, they consider it to be a historic contribution.
Yeah.